Welcome to Coach and the Coach. I'm your host, Coach KP, and with me is my willing accomplice, Coach JC. JC, this is going to be a great show. It's going to be an exciting show. And for me personally, it's exciting not because it's just our first show with a guest, but this is a guest whom I have known since I was a little boy. This is a guest whom his family is one of those families that I have always admired growing up. Not just as a young boy, as a child, but even as a man. And it's a fascinating human being who has a global view based off of his accomplishments and the work that he still does today. So I would like to just jump right into this. And with us, folks, is my dear friend, Pastor Kyle Horner. Pastor Horner, welcome to the show, brother.
Guys, it's so good to be here. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited about what you guys are doing, and that's so important to be able to really inspire people who are inspiring other people. Just right. I mean, it's what a task. What a great mission you guys have. So thanks for letting me be a part of it.
You got it. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot too hard here, but in my head is a printout from your radio show called Faith on the Field.
Yeah.
And this printout is your bio. Now, I could read your bio to our viewers, but to be honest with you, I don't think I could do it justice. So if you don't mind, why don't you tell us all a little bit about yourself? Who are you? What makes you complete? What makes you wake up in the morning, every single morning, with that smile on your face, with the energy that you possess, and drive forward and look at the world and say, you know what, I'm going to take you on today.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what you just said. You know, for me, look, it's really just about loving God, loving people. And that's what gets me up in the morning, and helping people that come in contact with a God who loves them. And how can we make this world better? How do we, understanding that we were born for more than just kind of living and dying and paying taxes and succeeding in business at certain levels, that we really are here to help make this world into a better place, truly being a part of making a significant impact in people's lives. And for us, my wife and I planted a church. We're getting ready to celebrate 21 years in October, and now we have 3 campuses now, and just we did that in order to be able to say, how do we help people live out this life? So that's not just about coming to church or not just about religion. It really is about realizing that we've been made by a Creator to live a significant life. And how do we define significance? And, for us, success is about looking at someone else and saying, how can they help me build my dream? Significance is really looking at someone and saying, how can I help them build their dream? And that's for me, growing up in a coaching household, I saw that my entire life. How do I help? My dad would always talk about how do I help these young boys become young men? And it's not, at the end of the day, it's not how many wins versus how many losses. It's how many men out of how many boys. And I think that's how I've approached life.
And I think that's what made your father arguably one of the most winningest coaches in South Jersey history. Was True. He didn't put winning first. He knew that was a secondary order of effect. He put the team first, those young boys whom he was inspiring first. And by putting them first, he was able to grow this foundation based off of historical roots of South Jersey football and truly achieve greatness for so many people's lives, so many young men's lives. And what's beautiful to me is, in so many ways, you're following the identical footsteps, maybe a different path, but the footsteps are eerily similar.
I think how we are raised and the environment that we're raised in and the worldview that we grow up in truly, it influences our life. The Bible talks about when you train up a child in the way that they should go when they're younger, when they get older, they won't depart from it. And so whether it's good things we're training them up for early on, or whether it's some hurtful or painful things that are in there, when they get older, those things are still there. And so I think it's so important for us, especially as Americans, to, when I have one son, his name's Jake, and I get to travel all over the world, and it's part of the blessing of my life. And my wife and I have decided for the time that he was young that he was going to go on at least one international trip with me a year, because even if we had to take him out of school and go, that interaction with other cultures, interactions with other people that don't look like us, think like us, don't wear the same clothes as us, don't come from the same background as us, it's essential. It's the only way that we actually can grow together as a people, is to have a global worldview. And so I think that's what sports does too. It really does. So there's this conglomerate of ethnicities and cultures and life experiences and socioeconomic backgrounds that merge in that locker room, and you're forced, for me, in a really good way, forced in a good way to really wrestle with all sorts of different thought processes and backgrounds. And so I think sports is so essential for those kind of things.
And it's hard to disagree. And JC and I have military backgrounds.
Yes.
And knowing how critical sports played in our lives, JC, step in here too, because I think your background with the military along with sports really sharpens the point that Pastor Horner just made. We are forced into a very unique, eclectic team, if you will. And we don't know how to do that. Many people don't know how to do that unless they're exposed early on to the different cultures and societies and ethnicities and the different socio-political norms that exist. And when you have sport in your life growing up, and then hypothetically you decide you're going to go into the military or any business workforce for that matter, and you are forced to integrate and become a team. And I know for myself, at least, the lessons I learned in sport absolutely transpired over to my adult life in everything that I've done.
Absolutely.
Here's kind of the problem though that we have today. I'm gonna be the contrarian here a little bit.
Sure. Please do.
That and I don't know that there's a good way to be forced. I think there's only a bad. I think force is obedience. If I force you to do something, I'm not asking you to be disciplined. I'm asking you to be obedient.
Yeah.
Not that there's not a time and a place for obedience, but in the accepting of others, I think that has to be a willing journey. That has to be a journey where you go into it and you don't have to be forced. The opportunity is exciting to you, and I think we can set the conditions for that to happen, but I don't know that you can make that happen in a positive way. The second thing that I don't like about forced is I don't think it's happening. I mean, I work with teams from high school to college at every division to professional, the NFL and the NBA. And I'm going to tell you what, you don't have to accept anybody on your team and still be successful, especially at the Division I level and at the professional level. Now, I think you can be more successful if you do kind of like I get it. Everything you're saying, I'm 100% supportive of and try to convince people that that's the way you do it. But the problem we have is we have a group of coaches right now, and that's who this is for, right? It's for coaches to listen.
Yes.
We have a group of coaches that are doing a couple of things. One, unlike your dad, they worry about their win-loss record, right? And I tell coaches, you don't get a win-loss record because you don't do crap. We've all seen bad coaches win state championships and national championships, and we've all seen great coaches go, 2-10.
Yep. Correct.
Right? You don't get a win-loss record. It's just how are you developing your team and the men or women on your team. So they're worried about that, and they're worried about this idea of an adversarial relationship with parents and kowtowing to superstars. And let me give you so I have a question for you, something that I've seen, and I'm probably gonna have a couple others when it comes to faith and all. But so I see my son. I'm very fortunate to have a son who plays Division I football, and He's on an SEC team, and he has a bunch of teammates who are all good kids. They're all good people. But they have, as a high school athlete, you don't have to be real disciplined.
Correct.
Be athletic, and you can run the show by yourself. And you can have a successful team, quite honestly, even with one great athlete at the high school level, I would argue.
Yeah.
And that individual goes to a prominent Division I school and does not know how to integrate with other cultures, how to integrate with a team, how to make his teammates better than himself. He is only worried about him, and for very good reasons, right? He may come from just a background that's garbage. He may have to worry about getting money in the future for his family. He has all these pressures that are solely focused on him. So how, in your mind, how did your dad do it? I know how we did it in the military. I know how I recommend it to coaches, but what do you think is a good way to inspire, not force, but inspire that desire to be integrated into something that's bigger than yourself?
Yeah, and look, first of all, let me just give a shout out to the SEC because it is the best conference on the planet.
Well, wait a second. You used to play for University of Tennessee, correct?
I did. So it's my boys are going through a little bit of a downturn right now, but we'll be back.
Yeah.
I do think that, and you asked a really good question. How do we? It's not about force from a perspective of making it happen. It's about giving people an opportunity to become something bigger than what they are. And I think when we understand, when we put team first, and we value unity above success, and I know that's difficult. Look, SEC schools in particular, big-time Division I colleges, they're looking at the bottom line, which is win-loss record. And I understand that, very well. I've got lots of good friends who are in the coaching profession right now. And they know that just because you're a good guy doesn't mean you're going to have a good job at the end of it. You still have to win and lose. And there are challenges, that you just brought out, JC, to be honest. Like the culture, the family culture, the youth culture of today is very different than the youth culture when I grew up. When I grew up and you had a problem at school, I was getting beat before I got, like, it wasn't the teacher that was wrong, even if they were wrong. No, it was me that was wrong first, and then we deal with something later. Where today, look, everyone gets an award or participation award, which I don't actually think teaches children the right concept, because we do win and lose in life. There's things that we have to work through because we didn't succeed at a higher level. I think there's a lot of challenges with that, and I know coaches have to deal with parents who think their kids are superstars. And I do think a lot of times, especially in smaller high schools and smaller divisions, you can have one superstar that gets can make a team successful. I think that's a lot harder on when the schools become bigger. Group 4, Group 5 schools in Ohio and Texas and Jersey and Pennsylvania. In Florida, they're not having one superstar run the show. It's multiple levels. You need a team to succeed. But I do think what you value, you'll pour time into. What you value as a mom or dad, you'll pour time into your kids. What you really value as a coach, you'll pour time and energy into. And I'm a firm believer that until we value unity, and that doesn't mean total agreement. I don't have to agree with everybody, right? It doesn't mean that I have to tolerate everyone's actions in saying that they're all okay. I don't believe that at all, because I think we're seeing some things in the NFL when superstars are saying, man, this team better get on my page. I'm not getting on their page. No, you've got it all backwards. That's not how team works. One of the greatest moments I ever had in my life came from someone who was a dear friend of mine, who happened to be commander for SEAL Team 6. Now, I know SEAL Team 6 doesn't exist, but if it existed, he was someone who talked to me.
It exists. It's just not as good as they say they are.
Well, you guys have way more expertise than I do. But I would say one of the things that he talked to me about that was so brilliant, he said, when you're on team, they teach you what team looks like. So one of the first things that you come away with when you see other things is you recognize what is not team very quickly. And for me, that was something that stayed inside of me for my whole life, whether it was looking at our team playing football, or looking at our team in church, or looking at our teams in the nonprofits that we run, or as a board member of an organization. It helps me to understand what team is and what team isn't. So when winning becomes the epitome, the only question I'm going to ask is, what do I have to do to win? Rather than, what is the best, most healthy team that I can have? How do we have the most healthy team? And Clemson for me is a great example of this. Dabo Swinney, I think, is a phenomenal coach who also believes in building phenomenal men. That's hard for me to say. They're ACC, right? They beat the SEC last year. Right. But I think he is much more about building a program and not about building just a successful moment. And so that's the challenge. And you asked a really good question. I think it's really difficult when the kid's 5 years old and mom and dad already have them in the pros. And it's the coach's fault when they're not in the pros. I know parents in high school right now are, everything's about getting a scholarship for their kid when their kid may not be good enough to get a scholarship. So I know the pressures, coaches, that you guys are under. And man, I applaud you for being willing to tackle those things.
I think you both hit a key word that struck out to me in this micro conversation was the word success. It's almost impossible to define success. Success to me is an adventure. And yeah. I've been told I'm super successful. I've actually had people look at me and say how successful I am. And I'm looking in the mirror when they say it, I'm looking around like, are you speaking to me? Like, what have I done that has been so successful? Because I don't feel like I am, because I'm always striving to be better. I know how much I could improve in my own life as a human being, as a husband, as a father, as a coach, and when we talk about success and greatness and so forth, I think it goes so deep into the individual level, yet from the individual level, how does it transpire into the team composition? And I think really we just need to have a completely separate standalone show, an episode, talking about what is success, what makes something successful. And we have, just so our audience knows, in the back of my mind, you brought up a SEAL team commander. JC and I have some pretty good connections in the Pentagon, and I have a he recently retired 2-star general who has already voluntarily said he has no problem putting himself on a cross and deal with our shenanigans and be a guest. And I think that would be a great thing. But I want to move on real quick, because people need to understand the show itself, Coaching the Coach, this is not a religious show.
Yes.
But we still asked you, a pastor, to be the first guest on the show. And you're the type of guy that I often I'm like, why when I have Kyle Horner in my mind, do I get pulled quickly a certain direction? And you just have that energy where you have that that tenacity to pull people in. And I'm going to tell you, it was the end of 1997. I got out of the military. I haven't seen you in several years.
Yeah.
And I was coaching Pop Warner football down in South Jersey. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. Coach Jim Draper was the big coach at that level. And he grabbed me and said, "Hey, Kerry, I need someone to come in and help with defense. Can you help me out?" I was like, "Absolutely, I would love to." I start coaching a couple weeks, and all of a sudden, somehow or another, I don't know how, but you and I connected again. And it was during a time, and I didn't know at the time, that you were about to create this church that you have, Connect Church.
Yes. Yeah.
Jersey. But it was a time where you said, and you grabbed me, I'll never forget, "Kerry, why don't you come with me? I'm getting a group of guys. You know them all. We used to play football together at high school. And I want you to go to Camden, New Jersey. and we're going to coach. We're going to hold a little camp for some of the kids there. And in my mind, I looked at you. I didn't say it, but I'm looking at you. I'm like, Kyle, look at all the guys you're talking about. We're all white. We all come from a relatively stable economic community. But you want us to go to Camden, New Jersey, underneath, I believe it was the Tacony Palmyra Bridge.
Right. Yeah.
And for any listener that knows anything about Camden, New Jersey, specifically that section of Camden, they know we're probably not smart going there in the first place, let alone to throw a football around. Like, people are going to look at us like we're nuts and we're crazy. Till this day, I don't know why I agreed to go with you. Yet on the flip of that, I have not one regret, but rather I'm absolutely thankful that you gave me the invite and then I took you up on that invite.
Thanks, man.
But I still want to know, what were you thinking? Like, why Camden, New Jersey? What was your intent behind holding this, couple days we did this camp? And do you feel like you achieved whatever that micro mission was, that battle? Do you feel as though you won that specific battle of your life war that you fight every single day?
Yeah, I mean, look, Kerry, first of all, thanks for coming to be a part of that, because we did that for many years. I think, look, sports breaks down barriers. It's a phenomenal vehicle to break down barriers. It's a glue. It brings people together because it's a language. Sport is right. It's a language. It has its own language. So we can speak about football. We can talk about team. We can talk about all the things that maybe we would never bridge the gap in our normal lives. You're right. I grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in a very stable home. I went to a majority Caucasian school. But my love for people, like I recognize the struggle that those young men and women go through in Camden, where over 80% of the young men in Camden go to jail before they're 21, which means that the opportunities that they have in the long run are very limited. 37% of the people in that city live beneath the poverty line. It's the most dangerous city in the world, in our country, per capita murders. So I'm a firm believer that if you can take what's in your hand and what's in your heart and give it to someone in your world, it'll always make a difference. I'm passionate about football. I love football. It's great. It's changed my life. It continues to be a major part of my life. And if I can take what's in my hand, which I'm good at, and give it to somebody else and use that as an opportunity to bring some joy into their life, to help them see the world differently, to help them see Caucasians differently, and the people who are coming from the suburbs to see people who live in the inner city differently. Look, that's our job. We've been talking about unity. We've been talking about building team. We've been talking about, a global worldview. The only way to do that is if we actually all become a little uncomfortable in our surrounding. And, so if I can take what's in my heart and what's in my hand, what I'm passionate about and what I'm good at, and actually extend that to the people that are in my world, it opens up doors. And I will just say to any of our listeners today, it may not be football. It may not be basketball or baseball. You may love to cook. Awesome. Invite some people in your neighborhood over and share recipes and, have a cooking moment with people and just eat together. It changes our perspective when we get out of our world. And I think one of the dangers today in our world is that we are so much more comfortable using our two thumbs behind the screen of a phone, texting people, than we ever are in actually going across the room to talk to someone. And that's, we have to cross, whether it's crossing the room or crossing the river, or crossing town, crossing the railroad tracks to the other side of town. It will change our lives, and we have an opportunity to help bring change into someone else's life.
Now, and just so the listeners know, correct me if I'm wrong, you went to Iraq in like 2003 or something, or 2004, something like that. I went to Jordan. I didn't get a chance.
we were supposed to get into Iraq, and for reasons obviously that you know about, you know, we have a foundation that works with Iraqi and Syrian refugees that we take care of and help young kids get education and all those kind of and food and clothing.
And I bring that up because I know you're a world traveler and you do a lot of humanitarian work and so forth. But I bring it up while we're talking about Camden, New Jersey, and we all know, anybody that reads the news knows Camden is not the safest of all places in the world. And in fact, I know I had a friend of mine who was from Newark, New Jersey, inner city kid who I served with. And when we were in Afghanistan together, he looked at me and goes, you know, I actually feel safe here. And I'm like, wow, you know, makes sense, you know?
Yes.
But I wonder how much of your early adult life where you had this vision and this mindset to serve something greater than yourself and really create in a unique way your own profession of doing good for others. If that experience working in the inner cities of South Jersey, like Camden and Philadelphia and so forth, did that help give you the strength and courage? Because it does take intestinal fortitude to travel the world as some of the places you've been to, to include places like Haiti and so forth. But did that help build that foundation for you that gave you that courage and that mindset that, yes, I got to go deeper into the world to extend my branches?
I think all experience like that, every time that we face something different, uncomfortable in our life, it builds a deeper level of confidence in our life. That, because I think so often we believe we can't do it, or something in our mind, we think something negative is always going to happen. And yet when you cross those bridges and you realize, wow, this actually was great. It builds something inside of me. You were talking about roots. You know, my aunt was my aunt, who I love so dearly. She was an original Peace Corps, so she was in the very first Peace Corps ever sent out by JFK. And you know, she would tell me stories all the time about her times in Brazil, her times in France, what that meant. She would take me to conferences in the summertime where other Peace Corps members were. I got to hear those stories, and I began to understand that there's such a bigger world out there. And that being a part of, I tell our team all the time, poverty has a taste and a smell you'll never get on TV. You can't read about it. You can't visualize. When you are standing in Haiti and there are children with bloated bellies, or when you're in Kenya and there are little kids dying, those are awesome. Those are things you can't ever get, I think, guys, outside of, you know, actually going. And so, you know, Kerry, for me, I had the opportunity to be a mission pastor before Danielle and I started the church here. So I got to be on every continent, save Antarctica. And I figured, man, the penguins can deal with themselves. But I've gotten an opportunity that many people never got to do. But it broke down so many walls, from my childhood experience to being, you know, going to the SEC and it being completely different culture in Tennessee, completely different culture in the locker room than I was used to in every way possible, right? They're playing country western music. Dude, I'm from Philly. We don't rock that way, right? They're going squirrel hunting on the weekends. I'm like, you're eating things, you know, you're shooting things that were just eating out of your bird feeder. It's weird. But all of those things created inside of me an appreciation for our different cultures, but also the willingness to walk across the room and to put myself out there, because somebody has something to offer that can bring light into my life. And I believe, without a shadow of doubt, each and every one of us is a carrier of light that is meant to be a part of bringing that into someone else's life as well.
And I asked this, and I admittedly, I asked it for personal reasons. I live in a very secluded area of Northeast Pennsylvania. Yeah. It's economically impoverished, a lot of broken homes, a lot of folks no longer have hope, if you will. And we've seen our sports programs absolutely just deteriorate, and it's turned into what programs we have left are losing programs, and I don't mean just by record, even though that is a big part of it, but they're losing as in they're just holding on by a string, and sooner or later, for example, football is going to be non-existent up here. In fact, our high school football team is integrated with 2 other high schools, and we can still only field a 16-man team.
Wow.
So I'm doing everything I can to. So in the military, we have this thing by Colonel John Boyd called the OODA loop. And I've only lived up here for a few years now because I was traveling overseas and so forth. And I needed to really see, I needed to orient myself to my surroundings and see what was going on and observe the reality of the situation. And when I went through those 2 phases of orientation and observe, I started realizing there's decisions that need to be made, but some of them might not be possible because there's such a lack of hope within the community. However, there's a few key influencers up here who have not lost hope. And the more that we reach out to them, the more tired they get.
Yeah.
Because they're constantly holding on to those strings and working so diligently. And yet on the flip of it, with those decisions, we have to understand every decision is going to impact a child. A student athlete. So I'm at that point where I'm living in a cultural shocking environment that football pretty much is about to die. And I'm trying everything in my power to keep it alive. And yet I genuinely could tell you, I know there's kids out here that want to play, but they need hope reinstilled inside them along with their parents.
Yes.
And that's where I'm at a loss.
You know,
honestly,
I talk about this a lot, and I think, Pastor, I think
you know your slide is what came to my mind, the one about hope and trust.
Yeah. Look, that was my first book talks about that, and it's funny because my second book talks about what is success. So it's we're gonna do that. And I think, Pastor, I hope this speaks to you, and I really like your thoughts, because this is important for coaches and educators and leaders at all level. We talk about inspirational leadership because that's what this world needs right now. And I do not believe that inspirational leadership, and it'll probably come up later, but I'm not a Christian. I'm a Buddhist.
Yep.
So, and my son is a Taoist, right? So we'll talk about that later if we have time. Because there's some things that make, that a coach like a Dabo Swinney, who Clemson, just to give you an idea, as an SEC guy, a son who's played for an SEC, not a Clemson fan.
I'm not either. I'm totally with you. Right? Exactly.
You can guess where my kid goes to school. And I don't have anything against Dabo Swinney, except I think he brings a lot of his faith into the locker room. And I think that as a leader, as a guy who's been a battalion commander, I'm going to tell you, you got to be really careful when you do that, because you alienate, part of your team. And
you absolutely can.
And I believe that inspiration is not about religion. I believe that inspiration is truly about providing hope and trust. Hope in the sense that what I'm asking you to do is worth doing, and I'm going to help you get there, right? And trust in I'm going to resource you, and I got your back when you fail.
Yes.
And hope plus trust kind of supersedes the fear that exists, because I do see, as a battalion commander, I remember asking kids as they would come in, how many of you have played, sports in school? Team sports was my first question. Then I just went sports, ran on the cross country team. And the number continued to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And what I realized is, we're creating this idea where there's this feeling of hopelessness.
Yes.
And nobody trusts anybody.
Correct.
And I talk about it with the NFL. I talked about it quite honestly. 2 years ago, I talked about it at the NFL Owners Conference. I said, you're creating a group of players, and I think here it is with Antonio Brown as a perfect example.
Uh-huh.
Antonio Brown was created. He's not just a bad guy. He was created over a long period of time by parents and coaches and people who looked at him and created a feeling of hopelessness and distrust.
Yes.
And it's not that he shouldn't take accountability for his actions. He should. There's no doubt that he should. However, I think that we as leaders have to look and go, all right, where did we fail this guy? Because at the end of the day, no matter what happens with any kid, and I tell this to coaches, and I'd love to know your opinion on this, whatever problem you have with a kid, whatever kid you got to kick off, the team, whatever kid I had to release from the Ranger Regiment,
Yes.
kid I kicked out of my Special Missions Unit, whatever kid I kicked out of the Army, I owned a piece of that.
Yes.
I apologize
Absolutely.
to every single one of them because I did not have the leadership capacity to get them to be successful. Now, maybe nobody in my formation did. Maybe no one in the organization did.
Right, correct.
Well, I believe somebody did. There's somebody in this world that has it. It just, I know it ain't me. So I'm curious on kind of like your thoughts. How do we get coaches as a coach? What would be your advice to a coach on, look, how do you get that? We talk about servant leadership, right?
Yes.
But I'd say go beyond servant leadership. Go to possessive leadership, right? We're not servant leaders to our kids. We're possessive leaders there are kids. And that doesn't mean I'm a snowplow parent. That doesn't mean I'm a bubble wrap parent or a helicopter parent or whatever we're calling them today. That means I want to instill in you all the good things that I need to instill in you to make you successful when I'm not here.
Yes.
How do we get that possessive leadership in coaches today? What would be your advice to a coach today to kind of feel that in a world where, hey, if you hug a kid, look, you can't hug a kid. You just can't do that. It's not okay right now, right? Best you can do is fist bump a kid, right?
Yeah.
You can't give kids rides home anymore. That
Correct.
a certain environment that makes coaches go, I don't want to get too close, which means there's only transactional relationships, no transformational relationships.
Yes.
So what do you do in this environment where there's this threat and this fear and maybe of real, right? I mean, it's unfortunate, but it
is real. Yeah.
How do you get them to but you got to feel like they're your kids. What do you do?
No, I think it comes back to the very first thing we talked about. What do you value? What am I trying to get that? What's the end goal? So in everything that we do, everything that you did, you had an end goal, right? You know what a Ranger was supposed to look like. So you worked backwards from that moment. And then you came to this recruit that was in front of you on day one, and you were like, oh man, we've got a long way to go. But you knew where you wanted to take them to. I think until we define that as a coach, and every coach has to be okay with what they believe is the end goal. I would never be okay with just wins and losses. I wouldn't be okay with having a team that would be racially divided. I don't have a church that's racially divided. So I will never, I'll go back to that just for a moment, because we made a decision very early on that our church was going to be multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-generational. And we knew that we would not draw from certain groups of people, large groups of people, because it's so much easier to be around people that are like you, that dress like you, come from your background. So we knew, but we started with the end in mind. We knew what we wanted and were willing to pay the price to do it, and created the culture. And that's one of the things that I grew up in really good culture, and then I've experienced in team and in sports very bad culture. And all that starts with the coach. It doesn't start with the players. It starts with the coaching team, the coaching staff. What culture are they going to allow, and what culture do they want that they believe will create the end goal? Everything that you taught the Rangers was culture. Everything. Because everything comes from culture. So I'm not going to allow certain things to happen. So when I grew up in good culture, whether it was my dad as a coach or some other great coaches that I had, they didn't treat star players differently. Matter of fact, in my experience, they treated star players more difficultly. Yeah. So we had a higher standard. There was a higher responsibility that we had, because people underneath of us were looking up to us. We had to wear that responsibility. And if that meant, so I was on teams that guys got let go of who were superstars both in high school, who were in our championship game, they were out partying the night before. Doesn't happen on our team. Coach made a great decision and said, not going to happen. You're not playing. Parents freaked out, but the message was sent for everyone who came up under that. This is the culture that will accept or not accept. But if you don't have that, you don't know what you want to take them, it's impossible to have a culture to get anyone there.
But you have to have buy-in though with that. You have to have
absolutely
buy-in with the parents and with the school staff and all the administrators and everybody else.
correct. And I know that's challenging. I think, JC, you said something earlier about, I think it's really hard to be a coach today because you have to be very creative. You have to be extremely creative to communicate to kids who are being distracted by 1,000 things, that are always on social media, and social media is telling them to think certain ways. Social media is certainly crafting the way that they think and the way that they respond. So, before, I think growing up, we had very limited exposure to other voices. Teachers in our community, right? Religious leaders in our community, coaches in our community, parents and friends in our community. But now everyone is speaking into your life. And I think that can be very challenging for coaches. And especially in a society that is saying, my child is never wrong. My child there's an entitlement. I am entitled to not to feel this way. And my opinion is as equal as your opinion as a coach or as an adult. And I think that those are challenging things to coaches today.
So it's interesting. It's interesting. So I look at entitlement and opinion and value of opinion. I kind of look at it a little bit differently. And the voices, I don't disagree. I think there's more voices. I think that, it requires parents and coaches to be allies, not adversaries on being filtered. One of the things you said, and I just want to hit it, and then Carrie, I think you've got something, is in the Rangers, we had a deliberate culture. It is written out. This is who we are. Recognized and volunteers as a Ranger. Fully know that has for my chosen profession. I always endeavor to uphold the prestige, honor, and high esprit corps of my Ranger regiment. Acknowledging, right? It goes on. And luckily, it's Ranger. Otherwise,
easy to remember. I like that.
But it was a deliberate culture. And what frustrates me about coaches and culture is they don't have a deliberate culture. They have words. They have these values, and values without context are absolutely meaningless, right? I can say integrity matters. And to me, if I say, oh, okay, so you'll tell your girlfriend that she looks fat in that dress. Well, no, I won't do that. Well, then you lack integrity. Well, no, maybe you'd want honesty, which is, do I really need to say this? Is this kind?
Right.
This, right? So it means something different. So we have to put these values in context, which the Ranger Creed does. And what I tell coaches is, and the way you get buy-in is, ask your teammates, tell me something. And I've done this with the Carolina Panthers. I've done it with the Charlotte Hornets. I've done it with the Johns Hopkins Blue Jays, their lacrosse team. What's it mean as a player? What's it mean to you to be a Panther? Tell me what that looks like. What's important? Then I don't have to worry about buy-in. And here's the funny thing is I've never talked to any group, team, small group, and asked them what they aspired to be, and then showed it to a boss and say, nah, that's not what I want. The leader, the coach goes, holy crow, that's what I'd want, right? So I think you're right. I think it is about culture. I think, though, that coaches, and there's some old school coaches out there, look, I'm going to tell you that we created entitlement. And you know what? I don't think it's bad. Here's what I think is good about entitlement. A kid today thinks that, hey, if I need help, I go get extra help for school. I'm entitled to that help. You know what? That's a good entitlement. I didn't have that, and I sucked at school, which, and joined the Army. But we created that, and there's goodness in the entitlement. And opinions. Look, your opinion has as much value as you as a person. However, that doesn't mean we go that way. I understand your opinion. Right. I recognize it. I can even respect it, mean not cause it harm, but say, but that's not what we're going to do. And I think coaches are really quick to say, to diminish feelings, opinions, right? They're kids. And
Yeah.
again, they're going to do stupid stuff and say stupid stuff and want stupid stuff because their prefrontal cortex isn't developed yet. Of course they're going to do that.
Absolutely.
But we as coaches, have to be able to say, all right, I'm listening to you and I hear you and I value you. But I have either an opportunity to adapt or to educate. I'm either going to adapt because I agree with you, or I'm going to educate you and tell you, hey, this is why I hear what you're saying, but this is why it won't work based on my experience.
Yes.
And I think that's really important because a lot of coaches, and I think Kerry can probably vouch for this as well, they want to run things like they think we run it in the military.
Correct.
I think the military is draconian, right? Do this, do that, shut up, and you don't talk back to me. And holy cow, if we did that, we'd be getting killed all over the battlefield because we listen to our people and we ask them what they're thinking and we want to know what they're feeling. I mean, we're losing 22 veterans a day because we didn't used to ask people what they were feeling. And it's okay to ask them that. So I think you and I are on exactly the same page. But what I want to make sure is that when coaches are listening to this, I want them to listen to the opinion of their kids and then educate those kids on why it might not be the best for the team.
Absolutely.
And I think JC, you just hit the point though that I was going to make is there is no child that's too old or too young to express themselves.
Correct.
Allows us as adults, as mentors, as facilitators to gauge an understanding of their inner needs. And if we could, and it's not, it's not us coddling them, but rather it's us understanding their needs, wants, and desires and helping them achieve those aspirations, or if we want to call them goals, that's our job.
Yes.
And if we take certain routes that we currently have as adults and we understand different measures exist to help branch out to those young children and even possibly their parents.
Definitely.
Then we as a team, being coach, child, parent, can make something happen. But if all of us aren't on that page of willingness of opening up the conversation, listening to the words that are said, and not just hearing them, but truly processing and understanding them, we will never be able to formulate an appropriate plan of action to help that child move forward. And I don't care if it's football, baseball, basketball, or any sport. I don't care if it's just getting them to be a better student in school, or if it's to get that child to say, hey, you know what, I want to open up a lemonade stand.
Yes, correct.
But it's going to take the community, if you will. And it's going to take leaders such as yourself, Kyle, who's done it for so many years, and JC, who's done it for so many years, to say to ourselves, look, I don't know what I'm doing right now. I need help. Who can I reach out to? Who can help me get a better understanding of doing something proper and right for the benefit of those whom are going to grow once I'm already done?
Yes.
Once I'm buried on the ground. And that's what Coaching the Coach, the show, is really all about. I'm hurting right now. I'm telling you guys right now, as a recreational football coach, I see a sport that I dearly love and hold deep to my heart quickly fading away. And I brought it up to JC a couple of weeks ago, and I said, look, man, I don't know what's going on with coaches, but they all think they know the answer. And here I am, I'm saying, I don't have an answer, but I'm willing to reach out to whoever's going to listen to my concerns and help me formulate at least ideas and strategies that can make things better. Kyle, I just want to say, we got to wrap it up now, but it is such a great conversation. I cannot thank you enough for partaking in this. And if you would, if you could tell us, how can some of our audience members follow you, where they could follow you? If you have a nonprofit where you get receive donations or whatever, talk to us real quick on what our audience members could do to stay with you.
I appreciate that, buddy. And thanks for having me on the show. And JC, what you just said is brilliant as well. You know, culture without context always leads to chaos, right? So we know that culture always trumps vision, no matter what the vision is, every time. So listening, just to wrap up what you guys were saying, listening is so important. And one of the greatest challenges that we have to face, whether it's in my profession or in coaching profession, is how do we take these timeless truths that are so significant and bring them into a culturally relevant moment? How do we culturally communicate these timeless things that are really life-changing? So look, thanks guys for having me. theconnectchurch.com, you can check out all of our podcasts, all of our campuses, what's going on. We have a partnership with Carson Wentz's AO1 Foundation that we do Thy Kingdom Crumb food truck. We take a food truck out and give away free food into the community all the time, which is a blast. So you can check that out as well. And there's just all sorts of things. So whatever's in your heart, whatever's in your hand, use it in your world and you can make a difference.
Awesome. So just so the audience knows, I want to throw a bone out there. It's called Z-Bones. I'm wearing them now. I've been wearing them throughout all the audience, all the audio that we got going on. We actually have a sponsor, believe it or not. Z-Bones is a company that cherishes what we're doing as men coming together, saying, look, this isn't about political correctness. We're going to talk real talk, and we want people to hear real talk. Well, they created Z-Bones. Z-Bones is one of those companies that I can't say anything derogatory about because it's helped me. When I was in the military, I've had hearing issues, and these don't go in your ear canal, they go onto the bone. And I'm telling you right now, if anybody wants to look into them, go to zbones.io/coach. Get yourself a pair. If you got tinnitus, the ringing in your ear, I'm telling you, if you wear headphones that go in your ear, I have issues with that. It bothers me. I have medical concerns with it. These things have been a lifesaver to me. So to all the audience members out there, my hat goes out to Z-Bones. Guys, thanks so much for being a part of this, and we'll definitely reconnect real soon. Okay, guys?
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Brought to you in part by the Second Mission Foundation.